Hey everyone, tonight we begin with a signature and a sentence I'll never forget. The pen was cold in my hand, the ink barely dry when my daughter Alyssa looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're not family, you just stayed because it was convenient." And just like that, the 43 years I'd spent raising her, protecting her, loving her, vanished. You might not survive this one. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you truly enjoy what I'm doing here. And while we're here together tonight, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city and local time in the comments so I can see just how far this story reaches. Now turn off the lights, maybe let a fan run for some gentle white noise, and let's begin tonight's journey together. The rain tapped steadily against my windshield, soft but insistent, like fingers drumming out an anxious heartbeat. I sat in my car outside the law office on North Cedar Drive, hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than my arthritic knuckles appreciated. I hadn't asked for this meeting. Alyssa had scheduled it without explanation. "Just be there at 3, Mom. Don't be late," she'd said in her clipped tone. "These papers need your signature." She hadn't even said goodbye before hanging up. Now I watched droplets race each other down the glass, wondering what I was really here to sign. At 65, you'd think I'd stop feeling like a child being called to the principal's office. But the nerves, they showed up anyway, especially with Alyssa. The receptionist didn't look up when I entered, soaked from the walk across the lot. "They're waiting for you in Conference B," she said, barely moving her lips. I nodded, wiped my umbrella on the rug, and started down the hallway. The carpet was stiff and gray, the hallway too long. I had the oddest feeling that each step was dragging me further away from something, though I didn't yet know what. I knocked. Alyssa didn't look up from her phone when I entered. She was dressed in one of her navy blue power suits, perfectly tailored, not a wrinkle in sight. Her hair, blonde like mine once was twisted into a tight bun at the nape of her neck. Brandon sat beside her, flipping through a folder thick with legal tabs. Neither of them stood. "You're 5 minutes late," Alyssa said, finally glancing up. "Sit down. We've got things to do after this." I perched on the edge of a hard-backed chair. My purse, leather worn and loyal, rested in my lap like a shield. "These are the final distribution documents for Dad's estate," Alyssa said. "We've gone through everything already. This is just a formality." Of course, I thought. A formality, like me. Brandon slid the papers toward me, avoiding eye contact. "Sign where the tabs are," he muttered. I reached for the pen, but paused. What exactly am I signing? Alyssa sighed, the kind of sigh you'd give a toddler asking why the sky is blue for the 3rd time. "It's just Dad's stuff," she said. "The house, the accounts, his investments. We've explained this before." They hadn't. They never really explained anything since Robert died. They just started making decisions behind closed doors, like I wasn't part of the equation anymore. Still, I nodded. I always nodded, because it was easier than confrontation. Brandon tapped the first tab with a little too much force. I began signing. He turned to Alyssa, already moving on. "I'm glad this is getting finalized. We can go forward with the renovations next month." I stopped mid-signature. Renovations. Brandon looked up briefly. "Yeah, we're gutting the place. Expanding the kitchen, knocking out the back patio. It's outdated." "But that's our house," I said, my voice catching. "Robert and I built that home." Alyssa didn't blink. "It's just a house, Mom. And technically, it's ours now." I felt the floor shift beneath me. "I don't understand." "Of course you don't," she snapped, then softened just enough to sound condescending. "Look, you moved in because we needed help with Logan. That chapter is over. He's in school full-time. We need our space back." "But you asked me to live there," I whispered. "You said it would mean the world to you." Alyssa folded her hands, her expression unreadable. "We appreciated it, but now it's time for you to figure out your next steps." Brandon finally looked at me. "There's a nice senior community in Brentwood. We've already inquired for you. They have vacancies." That's when I knew. This wasn't a conversation. This was an eviction dressed in polite language and legal forms. I finished signing the last page and pushed the folder away. I didn't trust my voice, so I stood up in silence. Mom, Alyssa called as I reached the door. I paused. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be," she said coldly. "You're not family. You just stayed because it was convenient." Something inside me broke right then. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet snap like a thread giving way after years of tension. I didn't respond, I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I just left. Out into the rain, down the same stiff carpet hallway, past the indifferent receptionist, and back into the gray afternoon. My steps echoed soft but final. 3 weeks later, Alyssa would find out what I'd actually signed. But in that moment, soggy, shaken, and shoved aside, I was just an old woman with nowhere to go and a lifetime's worth of love that no one wanted anymore. The motel room smelled faintly of bleach and old carpet. You know that smell, clean but still tired, like the room seen too many nights and too few windows opened. It had one lamp that buzzed one chair with a rip in the vinyl and a queen-sized bed that sank like a sigh when I sat down. I placed my single suitcase near the footboard and pulled out the only thing that really mattered, a silver picture frame wrapped in a dish towel. Robert. He was smiling in the photo arm draped around my shoulder, his hair windswept from that trip we took to Lake George. I could practically hear him laughing in that picture, or maybe it was just in my head. I held the frame close and whispered, "You'd be so disappointed." I didn't sleep that night. I lay on top of the covers in my clothes, staring at the water-stained ceiling, while memories I hadn't invited replayed in 4K across my mind. It's funny how you can forget the name of someone you went to high school with, but remember the exact sound your daughter made when she got her first A in algebra. Alyssa used to skip down the hall when she was happy. You could hear her from the kitchen, her little feet pounding in rhythm. She'd squeal and shout, "Daddy, Mom, look what I did." Back then, I'd tell myself I was raising someone strong, someone who wouldn't crumble under pressure, someone who'd be better than me. Be careful what you wish for. The next morning, the knock on my motel door was like a fire alarm. I scrambled for my glasses. "Checkout is at 11, a gruff voice called through the door. I checked the time, 10:43. "Thank you," I croaked. "I'll be down shortly." I showered quickly, avoiding the mirror. I didn't want to see my own face, not with the pillow-creased cheek and mascara shadows under my eyes. I just wanted to disappear, or maybe turn invisible for a while, preferably both. As I dried off, my phone rang. "Alyssa." My stomach twisted. I answered against my better judgment. "Where are you?" she asked, like I'd misplaced myself on purpose. "I'm at the Gateway Motel on Lexington." A motel she practically spat. "Why didn't you call Aunt Joanne?" Joanne, my sister, lived 3 hours away and hadn't spoken to me since Robert's funeral when she accused me of hogging the sympathy. Alyssa knew that. "I needed something nearby," I said simply. She sighed like I was being difficult on purpose. "Look, I just need Logan's vaccination records for his camp application. Where did you put them?" "No hello, no are you okay? Just paperwork." "In the study. Filing cabinet, third drawer, blue folder labeled Logan Medical." "Thanks." There was a pause. I hoped foolishly that she might ask if I needed anything. Instead, she said, "So, have you reconsidered Brentwood Acres? They've got an open spot next month." No, Alyssa," I said firmly. She made that exhale she always did when I wasn't behaving. "Mom, don't be stubborn. They've got yoga, water aerobics, even a book club." "Alyssa, no." Another long pause. "Well, you need to figure something out soon. Brandon's mother wants to use the guest room next month." Of course she did. The real grandmother. The one who mailed Logan toys from catalogs but never picked him up from school, never baked him cookies shaped like dinosaurs. "Understood," I said. "I won't be in the way." "Good," she said, sounding relieved. "We'll let you know when we start moving your things out." She hung up. I stood there holding the phone numb. My daughter had just scheduled my erasure like it was a furniture delivery. But something about her tone, her lack of hesitation, flipped a switch in me. Maybe it was hearing her voice with no warmth. Maybe it was the finality of "we'll move your things." Maybe it was just the silence that followed. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel powerless. I felt angry. And underneath that, something more dangerous. I felt ready. I sat on the edge of the motel bed and reached into my worn leather purse. Inside was a copy of the paperwork Alyssa had rushed me through. I'd signed where Brandon told me to, but not without reading. Not without noticing Box 14C. The small, unassuming line that let me designate non-estate personal property that wouldn't be included in the joint division. I had checked that box, and on a separate attachment page, initialed and notarized, I'd listed one item, the Carmel by the Sea house. Robert and I bought that cottage when Alyssa was in high school, back when we could barely afford a fixer-upper and a bag of oranges. We'd scraped together every penny spent our weekends, sanding floors, painting shutters, planting herbs in mismatched ceramic pots. Robert loved that house, we both did. We used to joke that we'd retire there, just the two of us playing checkers on the porch and bickering about crossword puzzles. He died before we ever got to live in it full time. But after the funeral, I kept the taxes paid, rented it seasonally, and quietly reinvested every dollar into a separate account Alyssa didn't know existed. It wasn't a fortune, but it was something. It was mine. And Alyssa and Brandon had been so eager, so sure of their control, that they never even looked past the signatures. 3 weeks from now, they'd find out the truth. But today I was calling Gerald Mason. Robert's old friend, our family lawyer, the man who promised to take care of things if anything ever went sideways. He picked up on the third ring. "Gerald Mason," he said. "Gerald, it's Evelyn Carter." A pause. "Then Evelyn, I've been expecting your call." And that's when I knew Robert had planned for this. Long before I had. Gerald Mason's office hadn't changed a bit since Robert and I first walked in there nearly 30 years ago. Same leather armchairs, same faded nautical maps on the wall, same ticking grandfather clock that made you feel like time was watching you back. He met me at the door himself, all gray hair and suspenders his reading glasses, hanging from a cord around his neck like a librarian from a better century. "Evelyn," he said, giving me a gentle handshake that turned into something closer to a squeeze. "I'm so sorry it's come to this." "Robert trusted you," I said, "so I'm here." He gestured for me to sit. "And I'm honored to still be of service." "You brought the paperwork." I pulled out the envelope I'd triple-checked before leaving the motel and slid it across the table. Gerald opened it with the kind of care that comes from knowing words on paper can ruin or restore entire lives. "Box 14C," he murmured, scanning the top page. "Well now, that was wise of you." He looked up over his glasses. "Did you read what you signed or just trust your instincts?" "I read it," I said. "I just didn't let them see me doing it." Gerald chuckled softly. "Smart woman." That's what Robert used to say, usually when I reminded him where he left his keys. He nodded, flipping through the rest of the documents. "You've excluded the Carmel by the Sea property, listed it as non-estate, and initialed it correctly, which means it cannot be contested as part of the estate's shared assets. And Alyssa and Brandon signed off on that." Without so much as a glance, he said, tapping the bottom of the page. I sat back, relief blooming in my chest like the tide finally coming in. Gerald's expression grew thoughtful. Robert was worried even before his diagnosis. "You know that, don't you?" I shook my head. He never said a word. He saw the way Alyssa's ambition turned sharp. He said she reminded him too much of himself at his worst moments. That hit me hard. Robert had always been the fixer, the one who tried to soften life's blows. He must have known this was coming and had simply chosen not to burden me while he was still alive. "I thought she'd come around," I said. "Thought maybe it was grief or stress or—" Gerald leaned forward. "Some people see the world as a ladder, Evelyn, and when they're climbing, they don't look down to see who's holding them up." A strange stillness settled between us, the kind that only exists between two people who know what it means to be disappointed by someone they love. He slid a folder toward me. "This has the documentation you'll need to assert full control of the property if they try anything. And I've taken the liberty of adding a clause to your living trust, naming Logan as a secondary beneficiary." My chest tightened. I didn't ask for that. "No," Gerald said gently, "but I've seen the way you speak about him, and I know what Robert would have wanted." I blinked back tears, not ready to open that door yet. How soon before Alyssa realizes? 3 weeks, give or take, he said. When the estate is officially finalized and they see the line item missing. And what happens when she does? "You'll be ready," he said simply. I moved into Gerald's guest house that afternoon. His wife, Helen, before she passed, had decorated it with soft blues and seashell-patterned quilts. It smelled faintly of lavender and wood polish, and unlike the motel, it didn't feel like a holding cell. It felt like a place you could gather your thoughts and hear your own heartbeat again. That night, I made myself a cup of chamomile tea, opened the suitcase I'd been too tired to unpack before, and found the small leather-bound journal Robert had given me on our last Christmas together. I wrote a little each day, he'd whispered as I unwrapped it. So you'd have me close even when I'm not here. I'd never had the courage to open it. Until now. The first page was dated 3 weeks after his diagnosis. September 18th, 2019. Evelyn doesn't know I've already contacted Gerald. She's still trying to hold everything together, cooking meals she can barely eat, and folding laundry just to feel useful. I watch her move through the house like she's protecting it from breaking. I don't have the heart to tell her that what I'm most afraid of isn't the cancer. It's what will happen to her once I'm gone. I paused my hand covering the page. October 4th. Talked to Gerald today. We're setting aside the Carmel house under her name only. She'll need a place to escape if, when Alyssa decides she's done playing Grateful Daughter. I hate thinking that way. But I've seen the way she speaks to Evelyn when she thinks I'm asleep. There's no warmth, no patience, only performance. My throat burned. Robert had seen it all along. November 12th. I don't want to burden her with these fears. She has enough already. But I've made arrangements. If she ever needs to leave, she'll have everything she needs cash flow a home independence. She won't be trapped. Each entry carried his quiet voice, his stubborn care, his steady love. Final entry, April 21st, 2020. My energy's fading. It's like trying to hold water in my hands, but she smiles at me like nothing's wrong, like we still have time. I'm leaving her a lighthouse whether she knows it or not, a place to stand when the waves rise. And when she finally reads this, I hope she remembers. She was never a burden. She was the anchor, always. The lamp beside me flickered as a summer breeze rustled the curtains, and I just sat there, journal pressed to my chest, crying in the quiet, letting myself fall apart where no one could see. Robert had given me more than a house. He'd left me proof that I still mattered, that I hadn't imagined the kindness, that I wasn't wrong for believing in something softer than strategy and power. For the first time in weeks, I slept through the night. And when I woke the next morning, the air smelled like ocean salt and possibility. The following morning, I sat at Gerald's kitchen table, spooning sugar into my tea and watching the sunlight crawl across the tile floor. It was one of those crisp, early autumn mornings where everything smells faintly like apples and change. I hadn't felt peace like this in a long time. I could almost hear Robert's voice. Evelyn, you're still standing, so stand tall. And that's exactly what I intended to do. After breakfast, I called a real estate agent in Carmel by the Sea. I'd held off for years, convinced by Alyssa that keeping the beach house was fiscally inefficient. She wanted me to sell it after Robert passed, but something inside me refused. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was a little voice, his voice saying, "Not yet." The woman who picked up sounded young and sharp. Her name was Riley. "I'd like to come see my property on Driftwood Lane today," I told her. "I'm considering moving back in." There was a brief silence. "Wait, Mrs. Carter, that's your house?" "Yes," I said, already amused. "Why?" "Oh, sorry, it's just that house is kind of famous around here. Tourists always stop and take pictures. It's got one of the best views on the coast." I blinked. "Really?" "Oh, absolutely. Everyone assumes it's a vacation rental or belongs to some retired author." Well, that made me smile. "I'll be there by noon," I said. The drive to the coast felt like driving into a memory. Every bend in the road, every eucalyptus tree lined up like old friends waving me back in. When I pulled into the driveway, I just sat for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, staring at the house that Robert and I had poured our hearts into. The shingles were a little more weathered. The garden had overgrown, but the bones were still ours. The front door creaked the same way it always had. The floors still groaned hello beneath my feet. And when I opened the French doors that looked out over the water, I stood still for several seconds, breath caught in my throat. The Pacific stretched out endlessly before me, deep blue alive. I had missed this view, not just because it was beautiful, but because it reminded me that the world was wide, that there was more beyond the four walls Alyssa tried to box me into. Riley arrived right on time. She wore a blazer over jeans and had the energy of someone who hadn't yet been let down by life. "You're the Evelyn Carter," she said as we shook hands. "Robert's Evelyn. I've heard about you." "Oh, I'm not sure I want to know what you've heard." She grinned. "Only that your husband used to read books to the neighbors' kids on this porch every Saturday and made the world's worst chili." I laughed. "That's true, about both." We sat in the living room as she walked me through the paperwork and outlined my options. I could sell, of course, for a significant profit, or I could move in, restore it, and stay. I didn't even hesitate. "I'm moving in," I said. Riley beamed. "I think that's the best thing I've heard all week." She offered to connect me with local contractors. I asked for a gardener, too. Someone who knew the difference between wild lavender and weeds pretending to be important. And by the time she left, I had a plan. Not just for the house, but for my next season of life. That evening, as I swept the kitchen floor, my phone rang. Brandon. My heart stuttered. I hesitated, then answered. "Evelyn," he said, his voice tight. "We just got off the phone with Gerald. We need to talk." "About the Carmel house?" I asked, even though I already knew. "You excluded it from the estate." He said no preamble. That was deliberate. "Yes, you checked a box and didn't tell us." "I signed the papers I was told to sign, Brandon," I said. "The fact that neither of you read them is not my fault." He went quiet. "We were counting on that property," he said at last. "It was a major part of our financial planning." My eyebrows lifted. "Interesting. You made plans for something that didn't belong to you." "Evelyn," he said, tone cooling, "this is bigger than a house." Alyssa's furious. "I'm sure she is. She's talking about contesting it." "She can try," I said evenly. "But I think Gerald will advise her to reconsider. There's a very clear paper trail. One Robert started long before he passed." Brandon exhaled slowly. "Look, I didn't call to fight." "Then why did you call?" "Logan's been asking about you," he said. "Every night at bedtime." That silenced me. "He found an old picture last week, the one of you two baking cookies with flour all over your faces. He wanted to bring it to school." Alyssa told him no. I pressed a hand to my chest. "He misses you," Brandon said. "And to be honest, so do I." I didn't know what to say to that. "I shouldn't have laughed that day in the lawyer's office," he continued. "I shouldn't have sat there and let Alyssa push you out. That was wrong." "Yes, it was," I said, "but you did." "I know." There was a long pause. Would you want to see him?" he asked quietly. "Maybe this weekend." A part of me wanted to scream yes. Another part wanted to ask what the catch was. But instead I just said I'd like that very much. After the call ended, I sat on the back porch with a mug of peppermint tea, watching the tide slip in like a secret. I'd thought I was done being surprised, but maybe I wasn't. Maybe this was the beginning of something. Something that didn't require me to be anyone's mother, anyone's maid, anyone's burden. Just Evelyn Carter, on her own 2 feet, by the sea. Saturday morning came soft and golden, like the kind of promise only the coast can keep. I was up before the sun, baking a fresh batch of banana bread and smoothing the quilt in the guest room for the 5th time. It felt silly, this nervous anticipation, but after everything after the silence and the slammed doors, this visit from Logan felt like a lighthouse blinking through thick fog. At 10:07, Brandon's car pulled into the driveway. I stepped out onto the porch just as Logan tumbled from the back seat, his backpack bouncing his shoes half-tied. He spotted me and bolted forward, arms flung wide like a bird trying to take flight. "Grandma." That one word cracked something wide open in my chest. I dropped to one knee, catching him mid-air. We stayed like that, hugging tightly, while Brandon leaned against the car, watching us with an expression I couldn't quite read. "I missed you so much," Logan mumbled into my sweater. "I missed you more, sweetheart." He pulled back just enough to look at me. "Can I stay for the whole weekend?" I glanced up at Brandon, who gave a slow nod. "We thought that might be okay, if it's not too much trouble." Trouble. Brandon could have asked me to paint the ceiling with a toothbrush, and I'd have agreed if it meant having my grandson with me for 2 whole days. "No trouble at all," I said. "Let me show you where you'll be sleeping." "Papa." Logan walked into the guest room and gasped. I'd made it as warm and familiar as I could, nautical-themed bedding, a plush orca on the pillow, a lamp shaped like a lighthouse. "You remembered I like whales." I remember everything I said, ruffling his hair. He threw his backpack onto the bed and spun around. "Can we go to the beach now?" "Absolutely." Brandon hovered in the doorway. "I'll swing by Sunday afternoon." "That's perfect." As he turned to leave, I touched his arm. "Thank you for bringing him." He looked at me, really looked at me, and nodded. "He needs you." That was the truest thing anyone had said in a long time. And the beach was still damp from the morning tide, but Logan didn't care. He kicked off his shoes and raced toward the water, whooping as if the ocean had been holding its breath waiting for him. I followed behind, slower but smiling, letting the breeze do its gentle work on my tired shoulders. "Grandma," he called, "look what I found." He held up a piece of sea glass, smooth and pale green, catching the sunlight like a secret. "It's perfect," I said, taking it from him and tucking it into my pocket. "You know what sea glass is, don't you?" He shook his head. "It used to be something sharp like a bottle or a jar, but the ocean tumbles it and smooths out the edges until it's safe to hold." Logan squinted at the horizon. "So it gets better, not worse." "Exactly." He seemed to consider that for a moment, then asked, "Do people work like that too?" Now there's a question with no easy answer. "I think some do," I said, "if they let themselves." That night, after spaghetti and a movie and brushing sand out of our hair, Logan crawled into bed and reached for the worn storybook I'd left on the nightstand, the one Robert used to read to Alyssa. "Will you read to me?" he asked. I didn't even pretend to hesitate. I tucked him in, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened the book. "Once upon a time in a town not far from here." His breathing slowed by the 3rd page. By the 5th, his hand had relaxed in mine. By the end, I wasn't sure who needed the story more, him or me. I sat there for a long while after he fell asleep, listening to the soft sound of waves through the open window. There's a kind of peace that comes from simply being wanted, from knowing someone is better because you're in the room. The next morning, Logan and I made blueberry pancakes, though half the batter ended up on the counter, and one pancake came out shaped like Australia. "I bet Grandpa would have liked these," he said, pouring syrup like a waterfall. He would have loved them, and he'd have called that one a maple continent. Logan laughed the kind of laugh that reminded me of Robert so much I had to turn away and blink quickly. Later, we sat on the porch watching seagulls play in the wind, and Logan asked, "Why did Mom get mad at you?" That question, it wasn't said with malice, just curiosity, but it still hit like a dart to the chest. Well, I said slowly, sometimes grown-ups don't agree. And when that happens, they say things they don't mean, things that can hurt. He leaned against me. "Did she mean it when she said you're not family?" I bit the inside of my cheek. "No," I said gently. "She was upset, but she was wrong." "You're always my family," he said fiercely, "even if she gets mad again." That was it. That was the moment. My throat tightened and I kissed the top of his head. "Thank you," I whispered. "That means everything." Brandon arrived later that afternoon. He stayed for coffee while Logan packed up his treasures, sea glass, driftwood, and a drawing of a whale with arms. "He didn't stop smiling all weekend," Brandon said, stirring his cup. "He's a wonderful boy," I said. "You've done a good job with him." His mouth twitched. "Not always. No parent does, not even me." There was a silence between us that felt like acknowledgement. "I'm looking at properties nearby," he said. "Small places, just enough for the two of us." "You're really leaving her then?" He nodded, exhaling like it hurt. "It's time. I should have done it sooner." I reached for his hand. "Just promise me one thing." "Anything." "Don't let her turn Logan into someone who forgets how to love people." His eyes met mine. "I won't." They left just before sunset, Logan waving wildly from the car window until they disappeared down the winding coastal road. I stood there, the wind tugging at my sweater, and whispered to the sky, "Thank you, Robert." Because somehow, even now, he was still guiding us. The next few weeks passed like the kind of dream that tiptoes gently around your heart, quiet, unexpected, and just warm enough to make you wonder if maybe things could truly be okay again. Brandon and Logan started visiting every Saturday. It began with coffee and kites, then turned into full weekends. Logan helped me plant marigolds in the front garden while Brandon repaired a few loose steps on the porch without my asking. He even showed up one Sunday with a sack of groceries saying, "Only Logan says your cereal tastes like cardboard." I didn't tell him I preferred it that way. I just let him pour me a bowl of something colorful and sugary and ridiculous, and we ate it together on the deck as the waves whispered below. It felt good, simple, not perfect, but real. One Tuesday morning, I received a letter from Alyssa. It wasn't handwritten. Of course not. It was a neatly formatted 3-paragraph email printed out on crisp white paper and delivered to my doorstep via courier. No dear Mom, no love Alyssa. Just, per our last discussion, it is clear that your actions regarding the Carmel by the Sea property were calculated and duplicitous. I would like to remind you that family matters should be handled with transparency and grace, not manipulation. I hope for Logan's sake, you will reconsider your position. I read it twice, then folded it carefully and slid it under the potted plant beside the door. It didn't deserve space on my desk. I didn't even bother to respond. Instead, I called Logan, asked about his science fair project, listened to him describe his clay volcano with a level of excitement most scientists would envy. Then I hung up and sat on my porch, letting the sun warm the places her words had tried to chill. She could keep writing. I wouldn't be reading. Yeah. On a breezy Friday evening, Brandon arrived alone. I met him at the door, confused. Logan, I asked. He's at a friend's sleepover, Brandon said. I thought maybe you and I could talk. My stomach fluttered. Not with nerves, but with that old, careful kind of caution you develop after too many years of being blindsided. I gestured for him to come in. We sat at the kitchen table. I poured us each a glass of iced tea. I'm filing for full custody, he said after a moment. I blinked. You are? He nodded. It's not just the usual fights anymore. Alyssa's been erratic, controlling, distant. She's taken up with some corporate consultant from San Diego. I've seen messages. She's already checked out of this marriage. I swallowed. And Logan. He feels it. He won't say much, but he knows something's wrong. Last week, he asked me if families can get unmade. My chest ached. What did you say? I told him that real families can't be unmade, that they just grow differently sometimes. That was a better answer than I might have come up with. What do you need from me, Brandon? His hands wrapped around the glass. Your voice. He paused. Your truth. What you witnessed. The things Alyssa said and did. The way she cut you off. It matters. I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to protect Logan, but because testifying meant digging through everything I'd just begun to bury. But then I thought about Logan, the way he had run to me that first day, the questions he asked about love and sea glass and being wanted. Yes, I said, you have my support. He exhaled and I saw his shoulders drop just a little, like someone who'd been carrying a too heavy bag finally setting it down. Thank you, Evelyn, truly. I'm not doing this for you, I said gently. I'm doing it for him. He nodded. That's exactly why I came to you. That Sunday, Logan came bouncing in through the back gate carrying a drawing. It's you, he beamed. I looked at the stick figure lady with curly hair holding a heart-shaped pie, standing beside a large house with Grandma's home, written across the roof in block letters. You're even holding cookies, I said, choking up. He nodded. That's because you always make everything better. I wanted to frame it right then and there. Instead, I folded it carefully and tucked it into the side of the old bookshelf right next to Robert's journal. Because some treasures don't belong on display, they belong close. Later, while Logan played in the garden, Brandon and I sipped coffee on the porch. Can I ask you something personal? He said. I raised an eyebrow. When have you not? He smiled a little sheepish. Do you ever think people can really change? I didn't answer right away. Because honestly, I didn't know. People grow, they break, they heal, but change, the kind that sticks. That depends, I said slowly. Are they changing to be better or just changing to survive? Brandon looked at Logan, who was currently trying to build a fort out of driftwood and beach towels. I want to be better, he said. Then you've already started. That night after they left, I sat on the porch and stared out at the moonlit water. The sound of the waves, soft and steady, reminded me of something Robert used to say when life got hard. Let the tide pull what it wants. You only need to keep your feet on the sand. I smiled at the memory. The tide had taken so much. But now maybe it was bringing something back, something small and steady, like hope. The court date came faster than I expected. It was a gray Tuesday morning, the kind where the sky forgets how to shine, and even the birds sound unsure of themselves. I wore the navy dress again, the one Robert always said made me look like a storm. Someone should think twice about challenging. I added a scarf this time, the soft lavender one Logan had picked out at a street market last fall. Brandon met me on the courthouse steps. "You look strong," he said, adjusting his tie nervously. "I feel steady," I replied. "That'll do." He gave me a grateful nod and we walked inside. The courtroom was smaller than I imagined. Intimate almost, like a living room where no one's allowed to raise their voice, but everyone's carrying a sword behind their back. Alyssa sat across from us, flanked by her attorney. She wore black, her hair pulled into a high, severe bun. She didn't look at me. Not once. But Logan did. He sat beside her, wide-eyed, fidgeting with the hem of his shirt. When he saw me, his face lit up just enough to calm the storm building in my chest. I gave him the smallest wave, just 2 fingers, and he mirrored it like we were part of a secret club. The judge was a woman in her 50s with silver hair glasses perched on her nose, and a voice that could either comfort a child or cut through concrete depending on her mood. She listened. She watched. And when it was my turn, I spoke. I told the truth. About the dinners. About the distance. About the day Alyssa said I wasn't family. About the way Logan clung to me like he was trying to stay anchored in a world that kept moving without his consent. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I just said what happened, what was real. And when I finished, I looked at Alyssa for the first time. Her eyes were sharp, but behind the frost, something else flickered. Maybe doubt, maybe guilt, maybe just surprise that I'd found my voice again after all this time. Afterward, we waited. That was the worst part, waiting. Logan sat in the hallway between us, sketching quietly in a notebook, while the adults tiptoed around the outcome like it might bite. Brandon and I sat in a silence that didn't need filling. He finally broke it. "Whatever happens, thank you." "For what?" "For being braver than me, for not giving up." I shook my head. "I almost did, I really did." "But you didn't." "No," I said softly, "because someone had to stand still while the tide changed." He didn't respond. He just nodded and looked at Logan with something that wasn't quite pride and wasn't quite sorrow, but maybe a mix of both. The judge returned that afternoon. Her decision was firm, fair, and spoken like a mother who'd seen her share of fractured families. Brandon was granted primary custody. Alyssa would have supervised visitation twice a month contingent on parenting therapy. Logan could stay with whoever made him feel safe. The judge had noted our bond and acknowledged the importance of maintaining that connection. No one clapped, no one cheered, but Logan from his little chair in the corner smiled. And that was enough. Later, after everything had been signed and stamped and sealed, Brandon and Logan came home with me. Home. That word felt truer now than it ever had. Logan curled up on the couch with a book, the same blanket he used to drag around when he was 5, wrapped tight around his shoulders. Brandon and I sat at the table drinking coffee and saying very little, until he said, I don't know what I expected out of all this. And now... He looked around the house, the photos I'd hung again, the smell of banana bread still lingering in the kitchen, the gentle whoosh of the ocean outside the windows. Now I just want to be better. For him, for me. I nodded. That's all anyone can really want. Nstos. That night, I found Logan's drawing left on my nightstand. It was a picture of the house, the real one. Not a stick figure cartoon, but a careful sketch porch shutters a little garden with the shells we'd planted together. And at the top, in his best handwriting, he'd written, "Home is where Grandma is." I tucked the drawing into the journal Robert left behind, sliding it right between the pages where he wrote, "She is stronger than she knows. She'll find that strength." He was right. And now I would help Logan find his. Thanksgiving arrived on the wind like a promise, cool, brisk, with skies the color of worn denim, and a sun that lingered just long enough to kiss the porch steps goodnight. It was the first holiday I'd hosted in years, and for once not out of obligation but choice. A real dinner, a real table, and people who wanted to be there. Logan had made a construction paper turkey at school, and we'd stuck it proudly to the fridge. His little hand traced out his feathers, each one labeled, Grandma, Dad, the ocean, chocolate pie. And this one made me smile. Tuesdays. Why Tuesdays? I asked him. He shrugged. They're not too far from the weekend, kind of hopeful. You know, for a 7-year-old, the kid had a point. Brandon showed up just after noon carrying 2 pies and a potted plant he claimed was festive. It looked a bit like a cactus wearing a red bow, but I didn't say a word. It was the thought that counted. We cooked together, passing wooden spoons back and forth like old dance partners. I handled the mashed potatoes. He took on the stuffing. Logan was in charge of quality control, which mainly meant stealing olives and making sure the whipped cream to pie ratio was high enough to qualify as a minor miracle. We sat down at the table, the 3 of us, and I lit the candles, even though the sun hadn't quite set. To gratitude, I said. To second chances, Brandon added. To chocolate pie, Logan finished. Fair enough. After dinner, we walked along the shore, bundled in sweaters, the sand cold and powdery beneath our boots. Logan darted ahead, chasing ghost crabs and hollering into the wind. Do you ever miss her? Brandon asked quietly, his eyes on the waves. Alyssa, I asked. He nodded. I took my time answering. I miss who I thought she'd be. Who she was when she was little, before the world taught her to close her fists instead of open her arms. Brandon sighed. I know that version. I married that version. She's still in there, I said, buried deep. But I don't know if she wants to be found. We walked a while in silence, the only sound the hiss of waves folding into sand. He's happier, Brandon said, nodding toward Logan. He smiles more. He sleeps through the night. He draws again. That's not me, I said. That's you. You made a hard choice. I had help. He looked at me, and there was something different in his eyes, something steady. No longer guilt, no longer apology, something closer to peace. The next morning, we decorated the tree. Yes, it was early. Yes, the turkey leftovers were still warm. But Logan insisted. I want it to feel like Christmas all month, he declared. So we dug through the old boxes, the ones I'd brought from my last house. Inside were ornaments Robert and I had collected over the years, porcelain angels, wooden snowmen, a sparkly pine cone Logan had made in preschool. He held it up. Can this go near the top? Absolutely. As we hung each ornament, I felt time stretch and soften. The pain of past years didn't vanish, but it faded just enough to let the light back in. At one point, Brandon stopped holding a delicate glass heart I barely remembered buying. This one's beautiful, he said. I nodded. Robert gave me that on our 20th anniversary, said it reminded him of me. Brandon looked at it, then at me. He had good taste. I didn't know what to say to that, so I smiled and kept decorating. That night, Logan asked if he could sleep in the guest room again. It smells like cookies, he said, and dreams. That one got me. After he fell asleep, I sat in the living room, mug of cocoa in hand, staring at the flickering tree lights. Brandon joined me after a while, carrying 2 slices of pie and a look that said he'd been thinking about something for a long time. I've been meaning to ask, he said, about Robert, about how you made it work, all those years. I leaned back thinking, patience, laughter, knowing when to let things go and when to hold your ground, and banana bread. That man would have forgiven anything over banana bread. Brandon smiled. Do you think that kind of love happens again? After everything. I didn't answer right away because I wasn't sure, but I said maybe not the same kind, but maybe something quieter, wiser, less about fireworks, more about warmth that stays through the winter. He looked at me like he was hearing more than words. Would you be open to that? He asked. I looked at him, at the man who'd once stood silent while I was cast out, who now stood beside me rebuilding something that almost got lost. Yes, I said, but slowly, like cocoa on the stove. No rushing. He nodded. Slow is good. Later, after he went to bed and the house was quiet, I opened Robert's journal again. I flipped to the back where I'd started leaving notes of my own additions to his wisdom. Tonight I wrote, love doesn't always look like a grand entrance. Sometimes it just knocks gently and waits to be invited in. Sometimes it's a second son-in-law who finally shows up in the ways that count. And just before I turned off the lamp, I added, sometimes love comes wrapped in forgiveness with chocolate pie on the side. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the letter arrived. I almost missed it tucked in between a property tax notice and a catalog for coastal throw pillows I hadn't requested. The envelope was thick off-white and embossed with gold lettering. I knew that kind of weight. It wasn't a birthday card. It wasn't an invitation. It was trouble. I opened it slowly, standing by the kitchen window while the tea kettle whistled faintly in the background. My hands were steady, but my heart had already started its quiet thump of dread. Inside was a formal notice Alyssa was appealing the custody decision. Of course she was. I read the letter twice before folding it back into its envelope and placing it beside the sink next to the dish soap and an old grocery list I never finished. I didn't cry. I didn't call Brandon. I just walked outside barefoot on the porch and stared at the water until my breath caught up with me. Some storms take their time getting here, but that doesn't mean you don't see the clouds. Brandon showed up the next day, the letter already in his hand. "She's filed in family court," he said, claiming emotional manipulation, claiming you've poisoned Logan against her. I scoffed. That child has more grace in his pinky than Alyssa could muster in a room full of therapists. She says you're interfering, that I'm using you to turn him against her. And what do you say? He sat on the porch steps, rubbing his eyes. I say she's scared, angry, and so far removed from the woman I married, I'm not even sure she's doing this for Logan anymore. We were quiet for a moment. She never asked about Thanksgiving, he added. Never called. Never sent a message. Nothing. She's not doing this for him, I said gently. She's doing it for control. Brandon nodded, resigned. We have another court date in 2 weeks. Then we prepare. The next day I called Martin. He didn't even say hello, just picked up with I figured you'd be calling. She's appealing. I know, already spoke with Brandon's lawyer. What can I do? Keep being you, Evelyn, he said. We've got the documentation, the therapist's report, the school notes. Everything shows Logan's thriving. I don't want him dragged into another courtroom. I don't think the judge does either. But if Alyssa pushes, the court will want to hear from you. Maybe even from Logan. My stomach twisted. He's just a child, Martin. And unfortunately, sometimes the truth needs a child's voice to cut through grown-up lies. That night, I sat beside Logan as he worked on a puzzle. He was quiet, focused, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Grandma," he asked without looking up, "why doesn't Mom want me to see you?" I froze. Then I took a breath and said, "Sometimes people get scared when they feel like they're losing something. But I'm not something. No, sweetheart, you're someone wonderful. And sometimes grown-ups forget that children see everything." He looked up at me. "I like it here. It feels like my heart isn't squeezing all the time." I reached out and gently tucked a piece of puzzle into place. "That's because you're safe. And being safe means being loved without needing to earn it." He leaned into me. "I love you, Grandma." I kissed the top of his head. "And I love you more than peanut butter loves jelly." He laughed like he always did when I said that. Because we'd said it since he was 2. And no matter what Alyssa tried to twist, she couldn't unmake that truth. On the morning of the court date, Brandon drove us both into town. Logan stayed behind with a trusted friend from school whose parents had kindly offered to help for the day. We didn't want him there unless absolutely necessary. The courthouse was colder this time. Not just the air, but the energy. Alyssa sat with a different lawyer. This one younger, flashier, with a briefcase that probably cost more than my first car. She didn't look at us. Brandon whispered to me, "She's going for full reversal, claims I coerced you into your testimony." "Coerced," I hissed. "What am I, a hypnotist?" The judge walked in and silence fell like a dropped curtain. She reviewed the documents. She listened to both sides. Then she turned to me. "Mrs. Monroe, may I ask you something directly?" "Yes, Your Honor." "Why do you think your daughter is doing this?" I met her eyes steady as the sea behind my house. "Because she doesn't understand the kind of love that asks for nothing." The courtroom went still. She thinks love is transactional, that it's about winning or keeping score, but it's not. It's about being there, even when it hurts, especially then. The judge nodded, scribbled something on her pad, then addressed the lawyers. "I will not be granting a reversal," she said firmly. "Nor will I entertain further appeals without new substantial evidence." Alyssa stood up, her face flushed with rage. "He's poisoned him against me." The judge raised an eyebrow. "No, Ms. Monroe. You did that all by yourself." And just like that, it was over. For now. Outside the courthouse, Brandon exhaled deeply like a man surfacing from deep water. "Thank you," he said again. "You always seem to know what to say." "No," I said. "I just stopped saying what people wanted to hear and started saying what needed to be heard." We stood there for a moment, letting the wind sweep through our coats, the sound of seagulls above. "She'll try again," I said quietly. Brandon nodded. "Let her. Next time she'll be fighting ghosts." Logan's already made up his mind. We drove home in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. At the house, Logan was waiting with a grin and 2 mugs of cocoa. "Did we win?" he asked. I knelt down beside him. "We didn't win, sweetheart, but the truth did." He beamed. "Even better." And that night, as the fireplace crackled and the storm winds tapped at the windows, I wrote in Robert's journal once again, "Truth is a slow tide, but when it comes in, it leaves nothing hidden." The week after the court ruling felt lighter, like a tight band had been cut loose from around my chest, and I could finally inhale all the way again. It wasn't just legal relief, it was emotional clearance. Permission almost to imagine something softer ahead. Still, peace has its own strange weight when you've been walking uphill for so long. I spent the early part of the week cleaning, not because the house needed it, but because I did. There's something about scrubbing a floor that makes you feel like you're rinsing grief out of the cracks. Brandon dropped Logan off every morning before work. Logan would burst through the door with a wave of chatter and little boy joy, then collapse into my arms like he'd been away for years. He was thriving. He was curious, playful, even taller somehow, like the truth had made space for him to grow. One morning, while he munched his cereal, he looked up and said, "Do you think people can change their insides?" I blinked. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" He shrugged spoon halfway to his mouth. "Like, not their bones, just the parts that make them mean. Can they fix that?" Out of the mouths of babes. I thought about Alyssa. I thought about the silence, the absence of any apology or explanation. I thought about the girl she used to be and the woman she'd become. Sometimes I said slowly, "But only if they really want to, and only if they try very, very hard." He nodded, satisfied with that. Okay. Then he asked for another bowl of cereal and started planning a spaceship made of cereal boxes and paper towel rolls. Children, the ultimate philosophers of our time. That Friday, Brandon stayed for dinner. Not a big affair, just chicken and roasted vegetables and one of those grocery store cakes with a swirl of icing that looked like it had been applied by a joyful child. Logan helped with the table, proudly folding the napkins into shapes that resembled either birds or tacos. Hard to tell. Over dinner, Logan asked if we'd ever all go on a trip together. Like a real vacation, he said, but with hot cocoa and seashells and maybe snow. "That's a tall order," Brandon teased. "Not really," Logan said. "Grandma's house has all of it. You just need the right time of year." I smiled into my water glass. After Logan had gone to bed, curled into the same blanket nest, he insisted on every night Brandon and I lingered in the living room. "You've built something here," he said, almost to himself. "Not just the house, the feeling. It's like everything calms down when you walk in the door." "It's the old floorboards," I said, deflecting. "They creak all the stress right out of you." He chuckled, but his gaze stayed steady. "I've thought about moving closer," he said after a while. I didn't look up from my tea. "For Logan," he added quickly, "so he doesn't have to travel so far between houses. And maybe for me too." I looked at him then, and for the first time, I let myself imagine what that might feel like. Waking up to his truck in the driveway, seeing Logan race between houses with a snack in one hand and a science project in the other. Having someone to share coffee with on more than just weekends. "You wouldn't be starting over," I said. "Not completely." "No," he said, "just starting different." Later that night, I stood in my bedroom brushing my hair the way I always do before bed, slow, deliberate strokes. Robert's photo sat on the dresser next to the seashell Logan had given me last summer. "I think you'd like him now," I whispered. And I meant it. Grief doesn't vanish. It just grows quieter when hope returns. And maybe this in-between space was hope in its quietest form. The next day I got a letter. Not the angry kind. Not from a lawyer. This one was from Alyssa. A real letter. Handwritten. I stared at the envelope for a long time before opening it as if it might bite. It was short, careful, like someone tiptoeing through a minefield. Mom, I don't expect you to forgive me, but I wanted you to know that I'm trying to understand. I've started seeing someone, a counselor, not because of the court order, but because Logan deserves more than what I've been. I know I hurt you. I'm not asking to be welcomed back, but if you ever want to talk, I'll be here. Alyssa. I read it 3 times. Then I folded it and placed it in the journal with Robert's entries. Not because I believed she'd changed, but because acknowledging that letter was an act of faith in myself, that I could choose how to respond, or not respond at all. For now I didn't. Instead, I walked to the beach with Logan where he showed me how to build a sand snowman. He gave it a hat made of seaweed and said, "This one won't melt, so it can stay forever." Like the moment itself, like the quiet peace I was learning to trust. Like second chances that sneak up on you, not like fireworks, but like a gentle tide that finally rolls all the way in. Christmas crept in like a whisper that year. No grand entrances, no booming carolers or tangled lights, just a gentle hush that settled over Cape Cod, like fresh snowfall that never quite landed. Logan and I made paper snowflakes and taped them to every window. The wind caught them now and then rattling them softly against the panes as if winter itself wanted to be let in. Brandon brought over a tree too tall for the living room, which made Logan laugh like a hyena. We trimmed a foot off the bottom and squeezed it into the corner anyway, a little crooked, a little stubborn. Just like our family, I said. Logan grinned. Perfect. That tree glowed every night, covered in mismatched ornaments, cinnamon sticks tied with twine, and a star made of cardboard and glitter that Logan crafted during art class. It leaned slightly left. So did we. But we were standing, and that was enough. One evening, while Logan was at his school's holiday movie night, Brandon and I found ourselves in the kitchen side by side frosting cookies that neither of us particularly liked. "I never knew you were so domestic," I teased, handing him the red sprinkles. "I never knew you were so ruthless with a piping bag," he fired back. We laughed easy soft, the kind of laughter that feels earned. He grew quiet after a while, studying a cookie shaped like a reindeer. "I filed the divorce papers last week," he said, not looking at me. I stopped mid-frost. "She hasn't responded yet, but I'm not waiting." I set the cookie down. "You sure?" I've never been more sure of anything. His voice was calm, not desperate, resigned but not bitter. "I stayed too long," he added, "because I thought staying meant stability. I thought it meant I was protecting Logan, but I was just showing him how to settle for less than he deserves." I nodded. "That kind of love isn't safe. It's a slow leak." Brandon looked at me. "And you showed him something else. What love looks like when it's steady, when it's not afraid." I blushed like a teenager caught sneaking out the back door of her own emotions. On Christmas Eve, the 3 of us sat by the fire. Logan was in his pajamas, blue, with tiny astronauts, and he was reading aloud from a book about a penguin who wanted to fly. At one point, he paused, looked up, and said, "I think this penguin is like Mom." Brandon and I both blinked. "What do you mean?" Buddy Brandon asked gently. "He keeps trying to fly," Logan said, flipping the page, "but he's going about it the wrong way. He doesn't ask anyone for help. He just keeps jumping off stuff and getting hurt." I didn't know what to say. He went back to reading as if he hadn't just offered a thesis worthy of a university literature class. Children Nature's bluntest therapists. That night, after Logan was asleep, Brandon and I shared a glass of wine on the porch. The stars were showing off silver sparks against the deepest navy sky. The ocean was unusually calm, lapping against the shore, with the gentleness of a lullaby. I was thinking Brandon said about staying longer, maybe through January. I sipped my wine. "You're always welcome." I meant more than just as a guest. I looked at him, really looked, and I saw not the man who had once stood silent while I was packed out of my own home, but the man who returned, who listened, who changed, who stayed. "You'd have your own room, of course," I said with a sly smile. He grinned. "Of course." We didn't define anything that night, but something settled between us. Not a plan, a possibility. Oh, On Christmas morning, Logan screamed with delight at the kite I'd hidden behind the tree. The same one we'd flown back in September had finally given up the ghost in October, and he hadn't stopped talking about it since. Brandon made pancakes. I made cocoa. Logan declared it the best Christmas of all time, which felt dramatic, but we let him have it. After breakfast, we bundled up and went down to the shore. The wind was low but steady, enough to send the new kite soaring above us like a banner, like a victory flag. Logan laughed so hard he fell over in the sand, holding his belly and kicking his feet. Brandon took my hand, and I didn't let go. That evening, Logan found the last gift tucked under the tree. No name on it, just a small box with a red ribbon. "Who's this for?" he asked. I smiled. "Open it." Inside was a simple silver chain with a charmed 2 hearts side by side, not interlocked, but close enough to know they'd always find their way back. "I think it's for all of us," I said. Logan slipped it around his neck. "I'll wear it every day," he said solemnly, "even on gym days." "Even better," Brandon said, pulling us both into a hug. And there we stayed our odd little trio under a leaning tree beside a fire beneath a roof that once held only 1 broken heart and now held 3 that were healing slowly but honestly. That night, after they'd both gone to bed, I opened Robert's journal once more. The last page had been blank for months. Tonight, I filled it. "Dear Robert, we're okay. It's taken a long time, and maybe we'll never be the kind of family I imagined. But we are something. Something real. And sometimes, that's better than a perfect picture. Love always, Evelyn." The first snow of January came down slow and wide, like the sky was shedding feathers instead of flakes. I woke up to that hush, an old friend of winter, when the world forgets to make noise and just sits there, blank and waiting. Logan was already at the window when I came into the living room, his nose pressed against the cold glass. "Grandma, the beach looks like powdered sugar." He wasn't wrong. Cape Cod had never looked so sweet. I made us pancakes this time with chocolate chips hidden in the center. When Logan found one, he gasped like he'd just discovered buried treasure. Brandon walked in 15 minutes later with cheeks flushed and hair full of snow. "It's a winter wonderland out there," he said, brushing off his jacket. Logan nodded seriously. "We should build a snowman army." "Why army?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "To protect the beach from pirates." "Naturally."
What?
After breakfast, we bundled up Logan in his new puffy coat, Brandon in mismatched gloves he'd borrowed from me, and headed outside. We didn't just build one snowman. We built 6, each one with a different personality: General Marshmallow Lady Frost, Sir Icelot, Captain Snowshoe, Miss Blizzy, and one Logan insisted on naming Kevin. Kevin had crooked eyes made from dried cranberries and a nose that had to be a baby carrot because I was out of full-sized ones. "They're perfect," Logan declared, surveying his army like a proud general. Brandon looked at me over Logan's head. This is what it's supposed to feel like, isn't it?" "What?" "Family." And there it was again, that gentle bloom of warmth where grief used to sit. That evening, Logan curled up with his new favorite book, something about talking otters and a treasure map, while Brandon and I cleaned up after dinner. He was washing, I was drying, a rhythm soft and familiar. "Can I ask you something?" he said, not meeting my eyes. "Always. If I were to buy a small place nearby, something simple, would that feel weird? Like I was trying to crowd your space?" I paused, dish towel in hand. "No, I think it would feel like a root finally taking hold." He smiled, relief clear in the lines of his face. "Then I think I'm going to do it. Do you want help looking?" "Yes, but only if you promise not to pick something with wallpaper from the 70s. "No promises," I teased. A few days later, Brandon and I met with a local realtor. We toured 3 homes before we found a modest Cape-style cottage just 6 blocks from mine. Blue shutters wrap around porch, a fireplace that practically begged for cocoa and flannel blankets. It even had a small loft space that Logan immediately claimed as my detective headquarters. Brandon put in an offer the next day. When it was accepted, he brought over a bottle of champagne. "Celebrating the future," he said, popping the cork with more enthusiasm than skill. Half of it hit the ceiling. "You're lucky I like you," I said, handing him a towel. He grinned. "No going back now." One evening, as the three of us sat together after dinner, Logan asked a question that stopped us both mid-chew. "Are we a new family now?" Brandon looked at me startled. "What do you mean, bud?" Logan shrugged. "Just, everything's different, but it's also better. And we still do family stuff, just not with Mom." Silence. Careful, delicate silence. I reached out first. "I think families can change shape, sweetheart, like clouds. They shift and stretch, but they're still there." He nodded slowly. "So, this is a cloud family." I laughed, the fluffiest kind. Brandon ruffled his hair. "It means we get to decide what kind of family we want to be. Can I decide we have pancakes every Friday?" "We'll put it to a vote," I said, "but you've got strong support." That weekend, Brandon started moving in small things, books, a guitar, a painting of the sea that reminded him of his childhood. One afternoon, I helped him unpack a box labeled simply Memories. Inside were photo albums, baby clothes, and a shoebox full of letters. At the very bottom was a photo of Alyssa, younger, smiling brightly as she held newborn Logan. Brandon stared at it for a long time before slipping it into a drawer. She was good once he murmured, before the ambition drowned everything else. "I know." He looked at me. "I don't want Logan to hate her." "He won't," I said. "Not if you teach him how to forgive without forgetting." January gave way to February, and with it came small routines that filled the spaces between what was and what could be. Logan started leaving notes in my coat pockets. "Have a good day, Grandma," with hearts drawn in red marker. Brandon and I began walking the beach together every Sunday morning, bundled up and silent, letting the wind do the talking. One morning, as we passed the dunes, he reached for my hand. No words, just fingers intertwining, palms warming each other. We stood like that for a while, watching the waves kiss the shore over and over again. There was nothing flashy about it. No fireworks, just gravity. Two people pulled by something steady and real. By early spring, the breeze turned softer, trading winter's bite for something sweeter, like even the air had started to heal. Logan called it jacket weather, which mostly meant he refused to zip his coat no matter how chilly it was. We let him win that one. He'd earned it. Brandon closed on the little blue-shuttered house in March. It wasn't far, just around the bend from my place walking distance, even for Logan's little legs. And though Brandon insisted on settling in slowly, the truth was, our lives had already started to braid together. We grocery shopped together, took turns with school pickup, shared pots of soup and episodes of Logan's favorite mystery cartoon. It was never official. It just became... One evening, as we finished a puzzle on my dining room table, Logan had disappeared halfway through, bored of all the blue sky pieces. Brandon leaned back in his chair. "You know," he said, "I used to think love had to be loud to be real." Loud. Big gestures, fights, dramatic makeups, fireworks. I nodded slowly. "And now?" He smiled. "Now I think it's this. Quiet, steady. Like tidewater, it doesn't shout, but it shapes everything." That week, Alyssa sent another letter. I opened it out of respect, not hope. This one was longer, written in the same looping script she'd used as a teenager. "I saw the photo of you and Logan at the science fair. He looked so happy. I wish I could say I'm in a better place. I'm trying. Therapy helps, but it's slow going. The hardest part is admitting what I became and what I lost along the way. I still don't expect forgiveness. But I want you to know that if Logan ever asks about me, you can tell him the truth. All of it. I don't want lies protecting my ego. He deserves honesty. I don't deserve him, but I do love him. I know that's not enough. But maybe someday it will be the start of something." I didn't cry reading it, but I didn't breathe much either. I folded it neatly and placed it next to the other. Then I called Brandon and asked if he wanted to join us for dinner. That weekend, I hosted a small brunch. Just the three of us and Martha, my old friend who had been with me through more tears and tea than I could count. She brought a strawberry pie and a crooked bouquet of tulips from her yard. "This place," she said, looking around the house, "feels full again." "It is," I said simply. Over waffles, Logan told Martha about his class pet, a turtle named Nacho, and how he was next in line to take it home for a weekend. "I have to keep a journal of Nacho's feelings," he explained. "Oh," Martha asked, "and what kind of feelings does a turtle have?" "Mostly hungry and sometimes bored." Brandon nearly choked on his coffee. After brunch, while Logan and Martha painted seashells on the porch, Brandon and I sat in the kitchen finishing the dishes. "I never thought I'd get here," I said, quietly rinsing a mug. "Not just physically, but emotionally." "You mean peace?" "No, I mean this kind of peace. The kind where the past doesn't rattle in your bones every time you hear a familiar voice." He nodded. "I still have dreams about it sometimes. The day Alyssa signed those papers. The way I felt afterward." Brandon dried the mug slowly. "Do you ever regret what you did?" "Not for a second." I met his eyes. "I regret what she did and what I let happen, but not how I stood up for myself." He reached over and took the mug from my hand. "Good," he said, "because Logan's watching." Later that week, Logan brought home a school assignment titled My Family. He'd drawn a picture of me, Brandon, and himself in front of 2 houses with a rainbow stretching between them. At the bottom, in careful letters, he wrote, "My family is 2 houses and 1 heart." I stared at it for a long time. Then I stuck it on the fridge. Because sometimes a child understands better than the grown-ups ever could. We started a Sunday tradition that spring. Picnic dinners on the beach, blanket, sandwiches, mason jars of lemonade. Logan would run circles in the sand until he collapsed in a pile of giggles. Brandon would lean back, eyes half-closed, contentment etched into his smile. And I would just be there, fully present, not waiting for the next hurt, not guarding against the next betrayal, but living in the soft, golden hush of now. One evening, as the sun dipped low, Logan climbed into my lap, tired and warm and smelling like sunscreen and sea air. "Are we going to do this forever?" he mumbled. I kissed his hair. "I hope so." And I meant it. Spring melted into summer like butter in a warm skillet, slow and golden. The mornings came earlier now, wrapped in the scent of lilacs and the sound of Logan clomping down the stairs before anyone reasonable should be awake. Every morning began the same. "Grandma, are the pancakes ready?" Sometimes I answered yes. Sometimes I handed him a banana and told him to be patient. He said patience was the hardest part of growing up. And honestly, he wasn't wrong. Brandon officially moved into his new house by the 2nd week of June. It was close enough to shout across the backyards, but far enough that Logan insisted on packing a travel backpack any time he went between houses. Just in case I get stuck in traffic, he explained fastening a helmet over his wild curls before riding his scooter down the sidewalk. He was becoming so much himself these days, somehow both fiercely independent and tender-hearted. He'd scribble "I love you" notes and hide them in my purse, and then later roll his eyes if I tried to kiss his forehead in public. It was hilarious and a little heartbreaking. Time had started to slip again, just like it did when Robert passed quicker than I wanted, quieter than I expected. One evening, Brandon and I sat out on my porch sipping iced tea and swatting away mosquitoes with mild defeat. "You ever think about what comes next?" he asked, watching the sky shift from pink to indigo. "I used to think about it all the time," I said. "Used to plan for every single what if. And now I try to let life show me instead of trying to outguess it." He smiled. "That sounds like peace." It took a long time to earn it. He nodded, then cleared his throat. "Would it be too strange," he began, "if I said I've started thinking about retirement?" I raised an eyebrow. "You Mr. Spreadsheet." "Don't laugh," he said, mock-offended. "I've been watching you. The way you live. The way Logan thrives in this rhythm. I want more of that. You know, it's not all pancakes and porch swings, right?" He reached for my hand. "Doesn't have to be perfect. Just has to be real." A few days later, a card arrived in the mail. From Alyssa. Not a letter this time. Just a simple card. On the front, a watercolor of a wildflower garden. Inside, she'd written only 3 words. "Thank you anyway." That was it. No return address, no signature beyond her name. But somehow it hit harder than the long apologies or courtroom drama. Because it felt final. Not angry, not pleading. Just acknowledgement. Acceptance. She wasn't asking to come back. And for the first time, I didn't need her to. Because I had already chosen myself. July rolled in with lemonade stands and sparklers on the beach. Logan's classmate Piper lived 3 doors down now, and the two had become thick as thieves. They called themselves the Detective Club and made up mysteries to solve missing flip-flop seagull theft, the case of the vanishing popsicle. It was a joy to watch. Their giggles carried through my kitchen window every evening like the soundtrack of healing. One Saturday, I found Logan on the back steps scribbling in a notebook. "What you working on?" I asked. He held up a list labeled happy things. Some were predictable beach days, pancakes, pillow forts. Some surprised me. One entry read, "When Grandma doesn't cry anymore." I stared at it, the breath caught in my throat. He noticed. "Is it okay I wrote that?" I knelt beside him. "It's more than okay. It means you've been paying attention." He leaned his head against my shoulder. "You don't cry like before," he said. "You smile now." "I still miss Grandpa," I said. "I know, me too, but it's different missing now." And he was right. It was. One hot night in late July, Brandon and I took a walk along the beach. The stars were bold that night, like they'd been practicing. He slipped his hand into mine quiet for a moment, then said, "I keep wondering if this life we've built is temporary." Why would it be? Because it wasn't planned. It wasn't built the way other families are built. I stopped and turned to him. "Brandon, nothing about the way we started was traditional, but that doesn't make it temporary. If anything, it makes it stronger, because we chose it, over and over again." He exhaled relief, softening the lines in his face. "Okay," he said, "then let's keep choosing it." That Sunday, I opened my journal, the one where I kept all of Robert's letters and my reflections. And I wrote a new entry. "Dear Robert, the garden's blooming again. Logan calls the daisies sun kisses. Brandon's house feels like it's always been there, like he was always meant to walk back into our lives and stay. I don't cry every night now, just on Thursdays sometimes when the wind smells like salt and memory. I hope you know we're okay. I hope you see the way Logan smiles. I think you'd be proud. Love, Evelyn." Later that day, I found Logan in the attic rummaging through an old box of keepsakes. He held up a dusty snow globe I'd long forgotten about inside two figures sat on a park bench as glittering flakes swirled around them. "Is this you and Grandpa?" he asked. I smiled. "Maybe. Or maybe it's anyone who believed in starting again." He wound it up. The tiny music box inside began to play soft off-key, but still carrying the tune. We watched the flakes fall together, and I thought, this is it. Not the end, but the middle of something good. August brought more than heat, it brought closure. Not the dramatic kind you see in courtroom dramas or hear in tearful confessions. No, this closure was quieter, softer, like the final page of a good book, gently turning on its own. It started with a phone call from Indy. I didn't answer at first. The screen lit up, then went dark. Lit up again, went dark. The third time I picked up. "Hello." A long pause, then her voice brittle as thin glass. "Mom?" Two words I hadn't heard in so long they hit me in the chest like a forgotten lullaby. I stayed silent. She continued, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. I'm not calling to fight. I needed to say something." I waited. "I found the journal," she said quietly. My heart dropped. "Harold's?" I asked. "Yes, in a sealed envelope in one of the boxes from your old house. It was addressed to me. I didn't open it for a long time." She paused, maybe waiting for me to fill in the silence. I didn't. And when I finally did, I cried. I cried for an hour. I closed my eyes. She kept going. "He wrote about me, about you, about what he saw before he died. And he was right. About all of it. About what I became. About how I treated you." Still, I said nothing. Not out of spite, but because I didn't want to interrupt what might be her first real moment of honesty in years. "I don't expect forgiveness," she added, "but I wanted you to know I finally see it. I see what I did, what I cost you." Her voice cracked. "What I cost me?" I sat at my kitchen table, phone warm in my hand, heart beating slower than usual. She waited for me to respond. And when I finally did, it was only this, "Thank you for calling." She let out a soft breath. And that was it. Not a reconciliation, not a reunion, but a small thread retied floating gently in the wind. Later that night, Brandon and I sat on the porch watching Logan chase fireflies across the lawn with a glass jar in hand. "Did you ever think we'd end up here?" he asked, leaning into the wicker chair beside mine. "I thought we'd all end up somewhere," I said. "I just never imagined this would be it." He smiled. I'm glad it is. So am I. He reached for my hand and squeezed it. I've been thinking, he said, about taking Logan on a little trip next month. Just the two of us. Maybe to visit my sister in Colorado, show him some mountains. I smiled. He'll love that. Brandon looked at me hesitant. You okay with that, being here alone for a week? I laughed gently. Brandon, I spent years being alone with nothing but ghosts. Now I have peace and space and a pantry full of snacks I don't have to share. He grinned. Okay, just checking. When they left for Colorado, the house felt oddly quiet again. But this time, I didn't dread the silence. I leaned into it. I read books. I took morning walks along the water. I baked bread just for myself and played piano again, my fingers fumbling through old songs that still lived somewhere in my muscle memory. And I thought about the letter I'd write to Logan for his 18th birthday. It would begin like this. You were the reason I remembered who I was. Before you, I'd forgotten that joy could live quietly, that love could rebuild from the ashes of pride. Thank you for making me brave again. They came home late on a Sunday. Logan burst through the door with a snow globe from a roadside gift shop and an avalanche of stories about zip lines, trail mix, and a dog named Biscuit who tried to eat his socks. Brandon was sun-kissed and smiling, and my heart swelled with something I hadn't felt in decades. Contentment without conditions. That fall, Logan started 3rd grade. He carried a new backpack full of sharpened pencils and sticky notes, with affirmations I'd hidden in each notebook. You're gonna crush it, one read. Remember, astronauts were once 3rd graders too, said another. He said I was embarrassing. Then he hugged me for 5 full seconds before jumping out of the car. Brandon and I found our rhythm. Some nights he stayed over. Some nights he didn't. There was no rush, no labels, just ease. At Thanksgiving, we set one extra place at the table for Logan's friend Piper, whose mom worked late. At Christmas, we donated toys in Alyssa's name to a local shelter. By New Year's Eve, we didn't need fireworks. We had each other, and that was more than enough. Now I sit here finishing this letter, this final chapter in a story that began with heartbreak and ends with hope. I'm 66 years old. My bones creak. My laugh lines run deep. And I've finally started using the good china on weeknights, because waiting for special moments is how you miss them. I'm not angry anymore. I'm not scared either. I'm just here, alive, loved, and ready for whatever comes next. Sometimes healing doesn't arrive with fanfare. It comes quietly, like the soft chime of wind against your window, or the moment you realize your morning coffee tastes good, again, not just necessary. Tonight, I want you to sit with this feeling of stillness, of knowing that even after betrayal, even after silence and sorrow, life can shift. We can return to ourselves. You don't have to be loud to reclaim your voice. You don't have to be perfect to be loved again. And you don't have to wait for someone else to call you worthy. That worth, it's already in you. Maybe your life has taken turns you didn't ask for. Maybe people you trusted walked away. Or worse, made you feel small in the place you once felt safest. But tonight, I hope you remember this: there is no timeline for healing, no single path back to joy. You are allowed to rewrite the script, to start over in your own voice, to build new homes out of old bricks and plant hope where the soil once felt barren. So take a breath with me, slow, deep. Let the past loosen its grip. Let tomorrow arrive without fear. And if no one has told you lately, you are still becoming, still blooming, still whole. Thank you for being here. Thank you for walking with me through this story. And thank you for choosing to stay until the very last word. If this story found you at just the right time, I hope you'll stay for more. Now turn off the lights. Let the hum of the fan carry you to rest. And know you are not alone.